Hello and welcome to AHSMR Patron Chess. Today I had some requests to see if I could beat the Kilobytes Gambit. And when you start up the site, it asks you, can you beat 1024 bytes of JavaScript? Do you think I can? So we play as white. The game has castling, en passant, and pawn promotion, but only to queens. It won't announce victory or defeat, but if we can't move and the opponent can, or the opponent can't move, we know the game has ended. And here's the interesting part. The entire brain of the chess engine fits into 1024 bytes, only 3 times the length of this help text, including setting up the board and validating moves. So that is a chess engine, that's a chess AI that has been compressed into a very, very small amount of data. Can we beat that? Let's give it a go. So I've been playing around a little bit with this, and I have noticed that the program does not know anything about chess. It doesn't have any knowledge. As you can see, it starts out with pawn to h5 here. That's a very bad move. And I actually figured out how to beat the program from a lot of starting openings in 12 moves, checkmate in 12 moves. So you can count along and see here if I manage. So these first 3 moves, now it's going to play a5. Oh, okay, sometimes it will play g5, and now it will play a5. So these 4 first moves, if the machine starts with either h5 or a5 against your pawn to e4, then you have checkmate in 12 moves, and it will play these 4 moves against the e4, d4, knight out, bishop out opening that I'm playing here. And here we push this pawn, and while I was playing around with this and trying to figure out how to get the checkmates, I started by capturing this pawn, and it is still checkmate in 12 moves from the starting position, but there were 3 variations, like there were 3 different things the machine could do. So if I do capture here on d5, I am threatening checkmate on f7, and there are 3 different ways the computer can respond. And the way the computer seems to work, the engine seems to work, is that it's semi-deterministic, meaning that if it evaluates a given move the same every time, it will play it the same move every time. But if it has multiple moves that it gives an equal score to, it will sort of select it at random. You can also see that in the opening where it plays a5, h5, b5, g5, and e6 sort of interchangeably against the setup. So I wanted, in my recommendation to you guys, if you're going to play this, I wanted you to be able to beat it in 12 moves with the least amount of memorization. And I actually found that if you play queen to d4, it is always going to respond with queen to f6, blocking the queen's attack on the rook. And now we capture this pawn. And even though it looks like we lost the tempo there, we tricked the engine into a position where we can checkmate it. And now you're going to be able to do the same checkmate every time, so you don't have to memorize the different checkmates against the 3 different defenses. actually, and it's interesting, but actually here it almost doesn't matter what you play. You just have to allow the machine to think that it can win a pawn by capturing this knight. First with the bishop, check, then you capture with the pawn, and then queen captures, check, and then king moves. And you can play almost any move as long as the machine still thinks that this is good. I'm just going to play knight f3, captures, you can see. It's always going to do this. Queen captures. And if you want to mimic the Immortal game, you can actually play bishop d2. It will then capture the rook, you will move the king up, it will capture the other rook, and you will get the same mate as I'm about to show you. But it does take one move more, and in the name of efficiency I'm just going to do this. It will capture there, not seeing that I have checkmate in 2 moves. Check and mate. So that is the opening sequence against when you play e4 and against a4, a5 and h5. You win with this this exact move order every single time. Let's just try again. So you can see it opens up a5. We do all the same stuff. d5, develop the knight, develop the bishop to c4. You can see it plays all the same stuff. Push the pawn. And here you saw I played queen to d4 to entice and trick the machine into playing queen f6. I can just show one of the variations if I just capture here first. Okay, chose to go there. That's actually the same. That's actually the same because now it's going to play bishop here, bishop b4, and here I can play anything. This would in principle be the best move, and you can see we get the same checkmate. It takes the rook, and it is not able to see far enough that it can prevent this checkmate. Let's just try out some more games. Okay, it keeps on doing this. a5 and h5 is what you will see the most. Sometimes you will see symmetrical, the king's pawn game, and sometimes you will see the Sicilian defense with c5. So knight f3, bishop, knight c3, I mean bishop c4, and I will just see if I can show a different pattern. Okay, so when it tries to defend the checkmate threat on f7 with the rook, if you want to learn the more, let's say, complex lines where you have to remember different lines, you can do like this. So you put the knight out on f3. It's because you want to go to, what's that square? That is g5. You want to go to g5. Now they play f6 to attack the queen. You put the queen on f5 attacking the rook. The rook moves and it's not able to see that this is checkmate in 2. You capture this pawn, and if they're always going to recapture with the rook, but it would be checkmate in 1 with king to e7 with just queen e5 would be checkmate, and now checkmate on f7 here, just defended by the knight. Let's see if we can show some different opening variations. You see it's doing this. Okay, e4, d5, e6, knight c3, a5, bishop c4, g5, d5. And you already know that we win in the same way every time with queen d5, but maybe there will be some different. Okay, it's the same. So it defends with the rook. We develop the knight to f3. It tries to attack the knight, and you can see the computer, it is able to look, I think, 1 move ahead and have some extremely limited evaluation functions, probably like who has the most pieces on the board or something like that, extremely limited. But what you will find is if you play this engine, it will do very well out of the opening. But if you're not a very strong player, you will actually find it quite difficult to finish the machine off. So you will have a great positional advantage, but it will prevent every checkmate it can, because you only need to look one move ahead to find out, okay, all of these moves lead to checkmate. I will play the only move that doesn't lead to checkmate. Then it can actually be quite hard to finish the machine off. Okay, so this is a little bit boring. You can see it's deterministic. It's playing the same stuff every time. Take on f7, recapture with the rook, capture with the queen. Let's see if we can get it to play some other variation. Okay, I'll just restart until we get maybe, yes, e5 here. So e5 is interesting because most of the time it plays this f6 move, which is a terrible move, but it's not obvious maybe to the beginner why that's the terrible move. It's still checkmate. We're still checkmating the engine here with a deterministic sequence of moves. And what's really interesting is that this engine is from 2020 or 2021. It's very new. And the opening theory that I used to beat this opening here is from 1550. Something about like that. There's a guy called Damiano, one of the first chess authors, actually before even Ruy Lopez, who wrote a book where he described this defense for black and said what you have to do here is you have to sacrifice the knight like this, and then you win. So I'm beating something from 2020 or 2021 with opening knowledge that's about 500 years old. That is the beauty of chess. So I throw the check. You could ask yourself, why doesn't it play g6 to defend against the check and not simultaneously attack the queen? What's going on there is that you will then play the same moves that I'm going to play now, capture the pawn on e5, and if it had played g6, I would be able to capture the rook. So, and now I just throw a bunch of checks. I have given up a knight, but the king's position is extremely precarious here. You play bishop c4 check, then you try to box the king in with queen f5 check. It only has one square, that is h6, and now can you find sort of nice little check? Yeah, we can move this pawn to check with the c1 bishop. Check, only one move. And here you'll see how the machine is able, even though it's terrible at chess, it is able to find sort of the best move in very pressurized, when it's really pressure, under a lot of pressure. Because now I'm going to play h4, and that's going to threaten a checkmate. So first it throws a check, because that postpones or delays my attack. Going to play c3. Now it plays d5. This opens up an attack on the bishop from the c8 bishop. But now I go to f7. I visit f7 every time. On f7, that's because if I were to capture now, which I can't because I'm in check, but if I were to capture this pawn, it would be discovered double check. It would be check from the rook, that would be the discovered check, and it would be check from the pawn. The pawn is defended by the bishop, and the queen takes all the rest of the squares, so that would be checkmate. And that's also why it plays this very strange move, bishop h3. It's simply because now if I capture here, it's not or is it checkmate? Actually, no, it's not checkmate. It's not checkmate because because the queen would be able to recapture, so it's not a discovered double check. So first I capture the bishop, and now it can play, like in this position, it actually every time it will just play a random move, because every single move leads to checkmate in one, and it's the same checkmate. You just capture the g5 pawn with like this. This is checkmate. So that's how you checkmate against the Damiano, and that is almost all you need to know to beat the engine. But just know that sometimes it will play the French defense, that is e4, e5, knight f3, and then e6 defending. I haven't worked far enough with the program, because it does that very rarely, so I don't know the checkmate there. But of course, when the engine isn't stronger than it is, there will be a checkmate somehow. And sometimes it plays the Sicilian defense, that's e4, c5, and I also haven't found the forced checkmate there. And by the way, when I say that these are forced checkmates, I mean that they are forced checkmates against this particular set of code. This particular set of code is deterministic or pseudo-deterministic or semi-deterministic, meaning that if you play the correct sequence of moves and you get it into the positions where it is deterministic, where it's not having options that it scores equally, evaluates equally, then it will be deterministic, and in that sense it's forced checkmate. It's not forced checkmate in the sense that that white is winning in 12 moves from the opening position against whatever black is doing. It's just against this particular program. So I hope you enjoyed this little video. I will be doing more little nice videos, like maybe some online gaming, playing against some of you guys, my patrons, or just show some little things here to just make it a little nicer to be a patron of ASMR Chess and show my gratitude for your support. So I hope you liked the video. I hope you have a very pleasant day, and I hope that I will see you again in the next